A very good afternoon to everybody. And before I begin, I would like to thank Dr. Rohit Shetty for inviting me to this amazing meeting. And I've learned so much in the last days. And the whole team at Narayan Nethralaya. So I will be talking about Sjogren's syndrome, essentially two different cases. So my case one is that of a 57-year-old female patient who came to us with intermittent irritation and redness, which was associated with blurred vision in both her eyes. She was more symptomatic in her left eye than the right. She also had history of occasional dryness of the mouth, and when we asked her specifically, she said that she needed to drink water, especially while she was eating food. And on further probing, she gave us the history of associated dental cavities for which she had undergone interventions. There was no history of stiffness of small joints, which is an important question to ask at this point because she could have associated rheumatoid arthritis, and no history of skin rashes or repeated mucosal ulcerations. She had history of hypothyroidism for which she was on levothyroxine and medications for cholesterol. Now, the important history here to look for and to specifically ask these patients is the medication history, because sometimes they might take some drugs for anxiety or allergies, and we could be looking at a drug-induced aqueous deficiency dry eye as well. Now, when we examined her, her best corrected distance visual acuity was 20/60 in her right eye and 20/80 in the left. And we can look at the ocular surface staining here. We can see that there is significant amount of interpalpebral staining. There was no scarring in the conjunctiva that was noted. In the left eye, she was more symptomatic than the right, so we actually had to decrease the illumination to capture the images at this visit. Now here I would just like to show, we took these films of ocular surface staining. We can see that the blink is complete, but as soon as the tear film moves up, there is the area break that is typically being described for these kind of aqueous deficiency dry eye. So this could very beautifully be documented in this patient. And we also tried to look at the palpebral lobe of the lacrimal gland, which can give us a clue to further diagnosis. We could see some tear flow, but it was reduced, and the gland did not look as pink as it does in normal cases. Her Schirmer's was reduced to 8 millimeters in the right eye and 6 millimeters at 5 minutes without anesthesia, with eyes closed. It's important to do it in the particular way and have your own protocol in which way we test for Schirmer's. She also had cataract and an ERM in the left eye. So at this point, our clinical diagnosis is aqueous deficiency dry eye with a probable primary or secondary Sjogren's syndrome. Now let's look at the ocular management first. We started her on tear substitutes along with cyclosporin eye drops, and also started her on surface steroids, which will be tapered by the time the cyclosporin starts acting. But the important aspect of management here is a rheumatology referral for further diagnosis of Sjogren's syndrome. So these are the typical tests that I would like to highlight that can be ordered in a patient like this. So we have the CBC, ESR and CRP, and ESR and CRP can both be raised. Rheumatoid factor can even be raised in patients with primary Sjogren's syndrome, so anti-CCP antibodies are actually more specific for patients who have rheumatoid arthritis. An ANA profile might be ordered to look for SLE, anti-ROLA antibodies again to look for primary Sjogren's, a thyroid function test, and serum ACE levels. So after consultation with the rheumatologist, they found no underlying autoimmune disorder, but she was anti-Ro antibody positive, serology positive for Sjogren's syndrome. So here, the final diagnosis was primary Sjogren's syndrome, which was made by the rheumatologist. And they did not start any immunomodulatory therapy at this point because primary Sjogren's, if associated with extraglandular manifestations, might require further immunomodulation, and she was just given oral pilocarpine. So this is the typical criteria that usually the rheumatologist use to diagnose Sjogren's syndrome. And if we look at this criteria, it is the patient either needs to be an anti-SSA, or we call it as anti-Ro antibody positive because that is more specific, or labial salivary gland biopsy positive. So at 1 month follow-up, her surface looks much better. It is stable, and we followed her up, maintained her for 6 months, discussed the role of punctal cautery with her as well. Her vision was worsening because of cataract, and it is important to understand that the surface has to be absolutely stable before we take these patients up for cataract surgery, and we do not need to rush into cataract surgery for these patients. So a few precautions that I would like to highlight during cataract surgery for these patients is first, limit incisional damage, avoid any astigmatic keratotomy or LRIs for patients like this. avoid using excessive topical anesthetic as well as povidone iodine eye drops, and NSAIDs both preoperatively and postoperatively need to be avoided. Coating the ocular surface with a dispersive OVD during the surgery helps us in avoiding the ocular dryness that we may experience. These patients can be extremely symptomatic, so reduce the illumination or make use of retroillumination techniques. And a word of caution for flats, because the suction rin can actually cause some amount of goblet cell loss and conjunctival damage. And we need to be very careful and gentle with ocular surface. So just to go through a quick video, I'm not using limbs here, just using the chopper to create the paracentesis and coating the ocular surface repeatedly with the dispersive OVD to make sure we do not have any drying of the ocular surface. These are the steps that we can take, making the use of retroillumination technique again, and importantly, using a monofocal IOL, avoiding premium IOLs for these patients, especially who have severe ocular surface disease. This is 6 months after cataract surgery. We see that the surface is relatively stable. Left eye, we still see some punctate staining, but she's maintaining a decent vision, and she's being maintained on tear substitutes as well as cyclosporin. And it is important to keep these patients on follow-up and guide them to see the rheumatologist whenever needed. Now, my case 2 is that of a 52-year-old patient who had blurred vision, pain, and redness in the left eye since 15 days. There is history of right eye keratoplasty, which was performed elsewhere 2 years ago. She did not have any records, and she was not keen on getting her right eye examined well. She had history of associated rheumatoid arthritis, and she had been non-compliant with the treatment. She had stopped all her immunomodulatory treatment. And when we look at the left eye, along with a dry ocular surface, we can see the tear film is breaking up. There is also this peripheral ulcerative keratitis, a little atypical because normally in rheumatoid arthritis, we find it extremely juxtalimbal. But she had a PUK associated with an aqueous deficiency dry eye because of her underlying rheumatoid arthritis. Now, here in this case, it is very, very important to tell her that she needs to seek rheumatology consult, and her RA factor was extremely raised. She was further started on methotrexate as well as oral hydroxychloroquine by the rheumatologist, and explained to her that her eye manifestations are related to the disease. And in terms of ocular management, she was managed with tear substitutes, cyclosporin, and for the PUK, we started her on tapering doses of topical steroids. This is after 5 days. We can see that the PUK is healing and she's symptomatically better. These patients need to be continued on systemic immunomodulation, which is the most important, and the topical steroids were tapered and stopped. So with this, I come to my final slide, that it is very important to have a good collaboration, like Dr. Geeta was stressing yesterday in her talk, that we need to talk to a rheumatologist and have a good conversation with them regarding when we are dealing with patients like this. And for a primary Sjogren's syndrome, just for the aqueous deficiency dry eye, a lot of time, these patients will not be started on systemic immunomodulation until and unless they have extraglandular manifestations, which can happen in patients with primary Sjogren's syndrome. Whereas for secondary Sjogren's syndrome, if there is an underlying RA or SLE, systemic immunomodulation is the key to the therapy, and long-term maintenance is important. If we take care of the systemic immunomodulation, the surface itself improves. With this, I would like to end my talk. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.